Good morning. It's Tuesday, April 14th. Boy, it looks awful nice out there. It's supposed to be raining all day. We'll take this every day. Um, we are going to continue our conversation on H 739, an act relating to prohibiting the use and sale of the herbicide paraquat. We're taking an extensive testimony on this. I still think that we are still looking for testimony. I'm looking forward to what we hear today. As customary in what we do at the start of the week, I just want to have the committee introduce themselves, starting over here.
Brian Collmore, representing the Rutland District. And I'm Rob Plunkett, representing the Bennington District.
Steve Heffernan, Addison County District.
Joe Major, Windsor District.
Senator Russ Ingalls, Essex District. I'd like to start off with some of the folks that are on our Zoom. And I see Eugenie Doyle. Are you ready, Eugenie?
Actually, I'm Bill.
They're both.
Yes. Yes, I'm here.
Well, welcome. And welcome to Senate Agriculture, and the floor is yours.
Okay. So my name is Eugenie Doyle. Shall I just go ahead? Is that?
Yes, whenever you're ready.
My name is Eugenie Doyle. I'm the co-owner of Last Resort Farm in Moncton, northeastern Addison County. And I am here because I had heard that you had received some testimony that it was difficult or impossible to grow strawberries without paraquat. I have been growing strawberries since 1982. In 1981, I studied small fruits at UVM with Dr. Bertie Boyce, who is no longer with us, but was a nationally recognized strawberry expert. That was his favorite small fruit. At that time, he did mention that it would be pretty much impossible, or at least very difficult, to grow strawberries without herbicides, which is what paraquat is. I very much wanted to use the minimum, so never used paraquat, but I at that point was not an organic grower. I did use Devronol and many other listed chemicals. However, when I became a mother, and after Captan, which was a fungicide which I had been using, was outlawed because of being a carcinogen, I made a very big change to trying to prove Dr. Boyce wrong and growing strawberries organically. We've been growing them ever since, and since the early 90s, totally organically. We're pretty successful. I started out with 2 acres of strawberries, then went down to 1/3 of an acre. When I transitioned to organic, we're back now up to about 2 to 3 acres. My son is in charge of that now, and he's a lot more ambitious than I ever was. But it's probably second to our hay production in terms of being a monetarily successful crop. We're pretty well known for our organic strawberries. And we, instead of using, we never considered using paraquat, but instead of using any herbicides, we use a very organized cultivation and cover cropping program. Cover cropping is pretty much the key, I think, to this. Also crop rotation. And I can be more specific about that if you want, but it's not, I would say, it's not that it's easy to eliminate weeds without some both mechanical and hand weeding, but it very much is possible. And we grow great berries. I have a bumper sticker on the back of my car that says farmers are healthcare providers, and I very much believe that. I think basically, as any healthcare provider, the motto is do no harm. And I think that in terms of growing all of our crops, that's kind of our guideline. Strawberries have a very bad reputation for being one of the most pesticide intensive crop. And it's something we are sort of battling in the public view. A lot of people don't want them because they have heard that they're head of the dirty dozen. But it's very possible, and we have huge local support, and invite you to come and taste them.
This committee prides itself on supporting all farmers. First of all, I will correct you on one thing. We did not take testimony saying that it was impossible to grow strawberries without paraquat. I think that's an important distinction to make sure that that gets on the record. But we do support all farmers, no matter how big or how small. 2 acres of strawberries, does that afford you a very nice living?
We have a 265-acre farm, diversified, organic, hay, and 25 acres of vegetables and berries. So we don't make our entire living on strawberries, no. But we do support ourselves on organic agriculture, and strawberries in that small amount is one of the most lucrative crops.
Nice. What else do you grow?
Well, hay is the biggest crop, maple syrup. We grow a lot of tomatoes. We have 7 hoop houses. We grow tomatoes, ginger, a lot of salad crops. Right now we have spinach, kale, mixed salad greens. We also grow for small fruit, blueberries, raspberries, gooseberries, currants. We do have some tree fruit, which we also don't use herbicides on: apples, pears, plums, and peaches. So highly diversified. We used to be dairy farmers, and kind of learned from that experience that we needed to diversify in order to remain in agriculture.
So you're educating us now, so I hope it's okay. So where are your markets at for what you're doing as far as in the farming that you're doing?
Yeah. So we have a farm stand at our place. We also supply City Market, both City Markets in Burlington, City Market Downtown, City Market South End, both Healthy Living stores, Healthy Living South Burlington and Williston, several restaurants, and 3 farmers markets.
Nice.
We have a farm share program. It's a free choice CSA program.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So you mentioned when your son came back, it's now 2 plus acres, 2 to 3.
Yes.
How do you handle the pests? Do you hand weed all those acres?
Okay. So as I mentioned, the keys to weed control in organic production, and this is not only in strawberries, but the entire program, is crop rotation, cover, and then mechanical control. So no, we do not hand weed all of them. But strawberries are sort of a unique crop because the cover cropping, 2 plantings of buckwheat and then winter rye the year before planting can very well control perennial weeds. Then the trouble is, which I think is what paraquat is, or I'm not sure, it might be a post-emergent. I'm not sure exactly how that works. But then for the annual weeds, we do cultivation. So once we plant the plants, we have different kinds of cultivators that will go down the row and use tines or baskets to get pretty close to the plant. That works really well until the strawberries start to runner, which is putting out daughter plants from each plant. We don't want all of them to develop, or the strawberry becomes a weed of itself. So we have machines that will slice off some of those runners. Then the final phase is some hand weeding. And we do, hey, it employs a lot of young people to go in there and hand weed. They learn a lot about plants. I would say at this point, and we've gotten really good at this, it's not onerous. I really enjoy it. You learn a lot about the soil and a lot about other problems or lack thereof in the crop, being close to it. But we have no worries about our workers working with the soil because it has not been treated with any toxic substance. So that's a plus. I never worried about my kids being in there, and they don't worry about my grandchildren being in there.
Is your farm right on 116?
No,
No.
we're on Tyler Bridge Road
Okay.
Yeah,
in Moncton. So between 116.
name fits. Name fits. You're on a back road on the side, last resort.
Right.
I
Yeah.
drive through there quite often.
We have a exchange. Yeah, and we did the Bristol Farmers Market for years. I knew many of your relatives. So forever.
Thank you. Yep, thank you.
Questions? Well, I thank you, Eugenie, and thank you for indulging in some education for us. We always like to learn, and we don't have a lot of organic folks. We have a lot of organic farmers in the state, but we haven't had a lot in front of our committee. So thank you for that. It's very helpful for us.
Okay.
And you're more than welcome to listen in and be part of any discussion.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to next go to Bill Soar. Is it Soar?
Yeah, it would be Bill Sure.
Sure. Well, welcome, sir. The floor is yours.
Thank you. We are a user of Gramoxin, which is the trade name that we use. That's the version of Paraquat. We also grow our strawberries organically. We happen to use black plastic, and that's working well. Cover cropping in the row. We have a 3-acre nursery that we hand hoe for weed control. That's a fruit tree nursery. Generally has around 20,000 plants in it. But the largest, the use of Gramoxin for us is on our 1- and 2-year-old newly established orchards. So we plant 10 acres of trees a year. Each acre has between 1,000 and 2,000 trees per acre. So the trees are being planted about 2 feet apart. So the total acreage that Gramoxin is used on is 20 full acres, but of course, it's only a quarter of that acreage that's actually getting applied the Gramoxin in an herbicide strip. There's we use a fescue grass in the orchard lane where the tractors are traveling. So the Gramoxin is very helpful in suppressing any competition for these young trees and allowing us to minimize our labor inputs, which we clearly understand through hand hoeing the 3-acre rather nursery. And then we stop using Gramoxin in year 3 of the orchard, and that is the year that some fruit is allowed on the trees. And then obviously year 3, 4, and 5, by year 5, the trees are fully established. But in those first 2 years, it's very difficult to mechanically cultivate our clay soils. And we know that if there's an extended rain period, there's no way you're going to be doing any mechanical weed control there. I'm not aware of other herbicides that can be used on 1- and 2-year-old orchards without damage to the tree. And that investment is around $50,000 an acre. So at any time we have 20 young acres being brought along. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I have gone through a training. We've purchased a special device to ensure that the operator that is tank mixing the gramoxone does not have any exposure. That applicator is always wearing a face mask, and the real problem, my understanding is with gramoxone, is it cannot be consumed through the mouth, and there, it is a lethal project if it's consumed through the mouth. Obviously, that's something all applicators would be insistent upon avoiding, but it's an extremely helpful tool for us in these young orchards that are being established. By the way, the benefit of these high density orchards where we're planting 1,000 and 2,000 trees per acre is, as they mature, the canopies are quite small. As you can imagine, the branches can only grow a foot between trees, and that's what we fruit on. But we can minimize our spray inputs on the tree by 50%. And so we can maintain the same or increase our yield per acre while having our foliar spray inputs. And that's, so long term, the benefit of these trellised high density orchards is there. One of the downsides is obviously weed control, and having a tool in the first 1 and 2 years for us is critical. I will say that we invested $15,000 in an attachment that goes on the front of our tractor that it operates like a weed eater, not turning horizontally, but turning, whipping down toward the ground. I'm not sure how that will do on the young trees, meaning 1 to 2 year old trees, but that is a tool to help us minimize the use of gramoxone. But I would be quite disturbed and discouraged if we lost access to gramoxone in the form that we use it in. So happy to answer any questions.
How much a year are you using?
In terms of total quantity?
Yes.
I think, do you have access to the total? In the last conversation with the ag,
125 gallons. I'm sorry.
excuse me?
125 gallons was purchased last year. Statewide.
Statewide, yes. And I understand that we are a significant user relative to the full state. And I think that access, you do have access to that information. I don't have it on the tip of my tongue. Probably somewhere in the range of 20 gallons. I don't know exactly, but
Okay.
that can be looked up, and I think it's now a public record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, could you restate the number of trees you have per acre?
Yes, we're planting between 1,000 and 2,000 trees per acre. So the trees are planted 2 feet apart. But if I'm growing a 2-liter tree, I'm planting them 4 feet apart. But I'm still, the leaders that come up are spaced every 2 feet. So it's the branches only grow a foot, and little darts of branches. If a branch gets as large as my thumb, it gets cut off because it would create too large a root system, and a large root system would create too large a trunk, and we would lose control of that block. But these are you're welcome to come out and tour. It's done in Europe and it's done on the West Coast, but there aren't many examples, if any, in Vermont of this progressive planting style.
Are you using these trees for yourself, or are you selling the trees on the market?
We do have a spring fruit tree sale that's going on right now for another week or so. Online sale, people come to the farm to pick up, and we have a state of Vermont fruit nursery license that we maintain and pay for annually. But that's a nice component of our business where we buy the rootstock and do our own grafting, and it's nice to folks get excited when they come out of winter and can purchase different types of fruit, from apples to plums to peaches to pears, from our own nursery inventory. But we're fairly self-sufficient in terms of supplying our own trees for our own plantings of 10 acres a year.
How big is your orchard, Bill?
I manage 380 acres of orchard. That may be the largest in the state. 250 of that is in our ownership, and the balance is leased.
Yep.
By the way, the wholesale apple business is a fairly brutal business. We don't see many surviving orchards. The Shoreham area was a mecca for fruit growing, but we've succumbed for various pressures, and I feel like this conversation might be one of those. Certainly, as a certified ecological grower, where there's an IPM Institute in Minnesota that certifies us as an eco grower. We participate in a program sponsored by Red Tomato, which is a marketing group out of Boston. And I don't sell fruit through them, but they provide us access to the certifying program. And ever since we started growing fruit in 1998, I've tried to be as sustainable as I can. And certainly the food co-ops in the state of Vermont have been hugely supportive of our position, where it's extremely difficult to be fully certified organic with our fruit. But we want to be far from a traditional conventional grower. And so there's been a nice niche there, and food co-ops have been very supportive, and customers frequenting those co-ops, as well as supermarkets, have really been supportive of our local supply chain.
How many certified applicators do you have, Bill?
That's a good question. I have 3 men in an exam right now in Rutland, and 4 on staff currently that would apply. It's actually a bit of a challenge. There was a former employee of the Agency of Ag named Dominique who would come to the farm and actually help tutor our young or up and coming staff. These 2 of my applicators, I'm one of them, and I have another man from South Africa. But the balance of the crew is part of our seasonal workforce from Jamaica. And Dominique would come and help them train for the exam and pass the exam. And we just did take a course last week down in Rutland. But none of the 3 that took the test passed the exam. They needed a 75%, and I think they were in the 57% range. Despite going through 4 weeks of training that was here with my head of HR, going through the whole 250-page manual. So it's a little bit challenging right now, because I don't know how I will, with the 4 applicators that we do have licensed, cover the acreage we need to this coming week. If we have a challenge with their second exam that's being taken now. So that is a bit of a challenge, and it was a good question to ask, because the exam they're taking is for a commercial license. Many of the fundamentals of spraying can be understood and taught in-house, and they're not applying 100 different products on different crops. So we make a recipe up. We have mapping available for all of our staff, and the people that are certified know our orchards well and have worked for us for many years before they have that privilege of that extra responsibility. So it would be, at the moment, we're a bit challenged by the process, but obviously needing to be compliant.
Can you give the committee kind of a mental picture? You mentioned that you have a tractor and this thing that's on the front of it, much like a weed whacker, but it sort of spins in the other direction. We
Yes.
heard testimony from other folks that run orchards about a wand that extends out from the tank, but it was, from what I was trying to imagine, handheld, and they were walking along and applying it. But this sounds, they're driving a tractor. Are they still
I think
on?
you're talking about 2 different applications. You're talking about a weed.
Oh,
I think you're talking about one of the pieces that you're talking about with the rotating cutting blade is not for
Okay.
applying
All right.
chemicals. Is that correct, Bill?
Yes, the tool we just purchased is made by a Norwegian company. the Netherlands actually. Rinieri, Rinieri, and it is a mechanical weed eater, but we have diesel powered tractors. So I would love to move. We have solar panels that power 50% of our total power usage annually, primarily to cool the fruit. But I would like to be running this Rinieri weed eater with an electric tractor, but I will be burning a huge amount of diesel fuel, trying to minimize our herbicide usage. Like Eugene Doyle, there is planting techniques that we can use to minimize the weed and grass pressure. So we apply a significant amount of bark mulch on our new plantings to reduce the amount of weed, basically to smother out the weeds. But as we all know, there's things like bindweed that can have a 16-foot taproot and have seeds that can last for, I think, 30 years underground and germinate all of a sudden. So if you look up morning glory or bindweed, that's a plant you're not going to keep out through some cover cropping, 2 rotations of buckwheat and rye, as Eugene mentioned. So some farms don't have that bindweed, but if you do have it and it spreads through mowers or this weed eater, for instance, the bark mulch is not adequate. It's lovely, right? It's holding soil moisture, it's building organic matter, and it's suppressing weeds. But you don't snap your fingers and have 20 acres of new orchard weed free. And it is critical for us to have tools through a long growing season on the soils we have, which are not suitable for cultivation when wet.
Thank you. I misunderstood. You were talking about 2 different functions, and I somehow got left off in the front one.
Yeah, to clarify there, the person that was walking around with a wand probably had a backpack on with a wand that was applying some form of herbicide. In our case, we have a tractor with a front-mounted boom and 2 nozzles, and the tank is in the back, and under very low pressure and 2 little nozzles, the chemical, in this case gramoxin, is introduced in water and is applied through these nozzles as we drive down the row on either side of the tractor.
Okay, thank you.
Bill, we pretty much asked this question of everyone who is currently using paraquat. If it were to be rolled back, what would you do?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. I'm already considering significantly downsizing the farm because we're not profitable. I have, to my knowledge, the ultimate customers I could ever ask for, whether it's 2 farm markets, pick your own and retail operation here at both Champlain and Douglas. And from a wholesale delivery route, we have 3 trucks on the road 4 to 5 days a week, year round, going to food co-ops and Hannaford Supermarket and Shaw's and University of Vermont, other hospitals. I couldn't ask for a more supportive clientele, but we are not, I don't want to fail as an old orchard that's over applying spray material to older trees and asking men to climb up on 20-foot, 30-foot ladders anymore. That's not progressive agriculture. And with one form of minimizing labor through efficiencies, including these trellis orchards, that I feel is what can help us differentiate ourselves or remain in business, I should say, as so many of our competitors have shuttered their doors or just gone to downsizing to the point where they have 10 acres for pick your own at most. When I think of Vermont, I think of dairy, and I think of maple, and I think of apples. So I wouldn't be surprised if you don't think of apples too frequently in the next 50 years, because it's not that we can't grow fruit well here, but there's a lot of pressure and there's not a lot of support.
Bill, paint a picture for us. I'm sure that you, like all farmers, there are a fraternity of, depending on what you're doing. You've started to paint that picture for us as far as for apple growers. You must have conversations with other apple growers. This has probably got a little angst going on. What is the conversation going on amongst your group of apple growers about the idea of banning paraquat or a chemical that is, anyway, paraquat or another name that does the same thing?
You know, I didn't understand the question. I was listening intently, but what was the actual question?
The question is this causing angst amongst apple growers with the thought process of banning paraquat?
Well, it would be good to, Terry Bradshaw would be a good one to ask. You know, they're asking growers to go into these high density plantings. But if you're doing 1 acre a year or 2 acres a year, you know, that's a challenge. And I don't know how successful those growers at that scale will be. But yes, you could say that it's an easy check off the list. Let's ban this because, let's face it, 125 gallons over the course of a full year through the whole state is not significant usage. I understand that. That could be an easy win. It's just, I value the fact that you're listening to my concern. And I don't have a solution. I know the weed eater is not going to, by the way, Gramoxone doesn't kill the plant. It just suppresses it for another 3 weeks or a month. And then you do have to reapply it. It's not like it's a solution for complete weed eradication. And the weed eater, as you know, you cut grass and does it grow better? It grows better. So the weed eater will facilitate this regrowth. If it's grass and the roots get established, you're in a battle that is probably one you don't want to continue on.
So you mentioned you had a couple hundred, maybe 225 acres, and then you lease a portion of that. What does the leasee grow on that?
Yes, we grow 300. We're managing 380 acres of orchard. Around
Okay.
250 of that we own.
Yeah.
The orchards that we lease are primarily older orchards. We use a mower that bumps off of each tree. It's a 13-foot wide mower. It's made in Holland, and they don't make the mower anymore. The little bump wheel that bumps off the tree has a brutal life. And I got a quote this morning. It's $4,700 to replace that bump wheel. And they told me to be grateful that they'll even supply it. So you can see that there aren't many orchards continuing these older plantings. They may be romantic and fun to look at. But every year over in New York, I shouldn't say every year, but if you look at the entire state of New York, the remaining orchards that have these big trees, people do die falling out of those trees off of ladder with 40 pounds of fruit on them. And if not die, we've had many injuries. It's slippery, right? You're picking in different conditions, and if you step on fruit, it's slippery. So these larger orchards, even the equipment like that mower I just referenced, are no longer being made. And by the way, people that still have those big trees are primarily using herbicide underneath the trees and just using a brush hog to go down the middle. That's one of the few plantings where we feel like we can eliminate herbicide usage because we have this mower. But as we discussed, it's getting harder to maintain that actual mower. I don't know if I answered the question well. I got on a bit of a tangent, no doubt.
I think you've done a very good job. So, any more questions for Bill? Bill, thank you very much. You're more than welcome to stay, listen, and comment as you go. Just if you if Eugenia's still with us, if you guys want to comment, just let us know. We appreciate you coming in very much. Very valuable testimony to us.
Thank you. We have a 1600 tap organic sugar bush, and so the USDA inspector and NOFA are here now, and I'm going to go join that inspection.
Yep.
Maybe that's evidence, like our strawberries, that when we can do things organically, we are. And I would be grateful if you can consider the fruit industry here and the desire to use gramoxone on a limited basis on these 1 and 2 year old trees, potentially have access to it in the nursery, although we're not even using it there right now.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you very much.
Appreciate your work.
Thank you. And we appreciate you.
Great.
We're gonna move on now to Scott Faber, Senior Vice President, Environmental Working Group, Georgetown University. Welcome. Floor is yours, sir. And I hope I pronounced your name
I
right.
did. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you for making time for me. I really appreciate it. Again,
Go boys.
well, it's an honor to be here. My name again is Scott Faber. I've worked for the Environmental Working Group. I also am an adjunct law professor at Georgetown's Law School, where I've taught farm and food law for many years, including pesticide law. Let me start by saying I understand that farmers need crop protection tools. I've had many conversations with farmers like Mr. Shore. I take my students to many large conventional farms so they can see how important crop protection tools are to farmers. And let me also say our pesticide laws are really designed to balance the needs of farmers to control weeds and pests with the need to protect people and the environment. In this particular case, I think the evidence will show that the harms that are caused by this particular herbicide outweigh the benefits to farmers, especially when you consider two factors. One is that there are many other chemical herbicides available to farmers, and I'm happy to provide a list of those.
Well, I guess we would really love a list because
Great.
we are finding out that there's no chemical available.
Well, I'm really
I'm
glad
going to
you
push back on your claim as far as to the risks that outweigh, because we have seen no risks so far. We've seen 125 gallons that are hand sprayed within orchards that are valuable to us, and we don't see the large drifts as far as where it is. And I guess probably we're having the biggest problem where we have 500,000 gallons worth of usage in California.
Yeah.
And they have yet to ban this terrible product, which I'm not saying that lightly. I do think it's a very dangerous chemical. I really, really do. But we see no efforts anywhere else where they're using a lot more chemical than what we're using of 125 gallons. That's you need to help us with that.
And I will try. I appreciate that. And I have watched some of your previous hearings, and so I appreciate those questions, Mr. Chairman. That gives me a lot of direction. Let me start by talking about the risks. So first of all, I'll just say I think you're all aware of the studies, the animal studies, the cellular studies, the human studies, the mechanistic studies that show what happens when paraquat enters the brain. But I don't think I've heard testimony about that, a little bit from Dr. Boyd. And we know from these animal studies, cellular studies, mechanistic studies, these epidemiological or human studies, we know three things. One is that when paraquat enters the brain, it enters part of the brain called the substantia nigra. It takes a long time for the brain tissue to clear paraquat. Two, we also know that once paraquat is in the brain, it sets off a chemical chain reaction, which causes something called oxidative stress, which results in cell death and ultimately destroys the neurons, in this case, the dopaminergic neurons that impact motor control and our behavior. And many of you, I hope not, have been touched by paraquat. You know what the classic symptoms of, Parkinson's, you know what the classic symptoms of Parkinson's disease are. So we know that it stays in the brain, gets this portion of the brain that controls motor control. We know it takes a long time to clear from the brain. We know that it causes oxidative stress that kills the neurons in the brain, the dopamine producing neurons in the brain that cause the hallmark symptoms of Parkinson's disease. Here's the other thing we also know. And I'll just say quickly, what's interesting, we're all learning a lot about paraquat. What's interesting is that the same chemical chain reaction that occurs in our brains, this oxidative stress that kills the cells, is the same chemical chain reaction that paraquat causes in plants. So the paraquat takes electrons from the mitochondria and starts this chemical chain reaction, which ultimately reduces the production of chlorophyll cells, which ultimately damages the plant. So it's as if somebody were setting a match to the brain or to the plant to cause the destruction of these cells, resulting in cell death. So there's, again, I'll send all the studies, happy to share more, but that's what we know about the harm that paraquat causes.
But where in Vermont is that
Well, let me
going?
come to that. So the other,
Yeah,
so I know
very
people in a
important,
lot of, absolutely.
Because this is in California. This is Vermont,
I'm gonna come to California.
125 gallons.
Absolutely. So let me talk a little bit about that, because I know you've talked a lot about drift. And you've learned that we apply paraquat with a wand, with a backpack sprayer or off a tractor of some kind. And if any of you, I've got a backpack sprayer, some of you may have backpack sprayers with a wand. You know, when the pesticide comes out of the end of the wand, it comes out as a liquid. And if it's a windy day, the wind may take those pesticide particles and it may drift with the wind. That is not what happens with paraquat. What happens with paraquat is the paraquat will volatilize and move up into the air and travel in the air as a vapor. So if you remember nothing else from my testimony, it's that the risk posed by paraquat is not the risk posed by drift. And I know there's been some confusion about that. Paraquat is different because of the vapor pressure of paraquat, causing it to volatilize into the air. It turns into a vapor and then travels in the air. And what's new, here's what we've known until last October. Until last October, we knew that paraquat gets into your brain. We know it kills cells. We know that people who live near fields where paraquat has been sprayed are more likely to get Parkinson's disease. All of that is well established. Last October, we learned something new. We learned, and Steve Dwimmel, thank you. Yes, did a terrific job of explaining this. We learned that Syngenta told the EPA that for decades, they had been miscalculating this vapor pressure question. And what that meant was they were underestimating by a factor of 4,000 the potential for paraquat to volatilize and move into the air as an invisible vapor. So we can all see drift. You can all imagine drift. I actually got this is really crude, but I brought a picture because I know it's hard to visualize this on past examples. To help you visualize the difference between drift and vapor. So we learned, and this is, and I guarantee you that none of the farmers who use paraquat that you've heard from know about this October study. We learned, we all, the people who teach farm law and teach pesticide law, and others who are in the business of regulating pesticides all learned that paraquat has a higher vapor pressure, is more likely to volatilize and turn
So we
into
hear
a
the
vapor.
opposite of that.
And
We
then
hear
drift.
that, we hear this low pressure. That's what it's doing, and it's larger droplets. I was an applicator too. I've done. I've done the hand spraying. I've done on the back of a skidder with a pressurized tank, and I've done 50-foot booms, and now they have 100-foot booms. So I've
So
done it.
you know, so
Yeah.
that you're the right person to be running this hearing. That's terrific. So you know that there's a big difference between drift and vapor. What you may not know, and what we all learned in October, is that when EPA recalculated with this new measure of vapor pressure, how far paraquat could travel as a vapor, they modeled that it could travel at least concentrations of concern, not just paraquat concentrations of concern, their language, not mine, could travel at least 2.7 miles from where it had been applied.
We did hear that system.
Okay, you have heard that. So
My
yeah,
question with you is that it can travel that far, and from what I understand, its volatility and its persistence doesn't last that long. That's why it's another good. It's got a 24 actual 48 hours to stay off where it's been treated. That's probably double the shelf life.
So
So when it gets into the vapor form.
Yeah.
How active is that vapor form for how long? Have they, for this? So.
what EPA told us, and I'm sure you have this October paper, but I'm happy to send it as well, is that, as you know, the restricted period sounds like it's about 48 hours before you can go back into the field. Well, what EPA said is that it can stay on the plant and continue to volatilize into a vapor for hours or days. They did not say how many days, but I can go back to the authors of the paper and ask, for how many days can this, again, visible vapor, unlike drift, continue to travel off the field and into nearby neighborhoods and other farms? And what that chart that Steve showed you, I know you all have it in your mind, especially you, because you think about vapor pressure for a living, showed you was that the older study assumed that paraquat just stayed put, that it had very, very low vapor pressure. What the chart showed us is that the new study showed us, the Syngenta study showed us, is that the vapor pressure for paraquat is actually close to the vapor pressure for dicamba. So as someone who's a pesticide applicator, Mr. Chairman, you know, the most notorious pesticide for drift and volatility is dicamba. So even I hadn't seen that chart. That like set off alarm bells for me, that the vapor pressure, the actual vapor for pressure for paraquat is so much higher that it's more akin to dicamba, which often travels far off the field, which of course is bad for the people who might live nearby. It's also bad for the farmers who might live nearby and plants might be impacted.
For those of us that don't apply this stuff, what is dicamba?
Oh, dicamba is another broadleaf herbicide that is now being reformulated, as you know, to address the risk that it might drift or travel offsite and harm especially the crops of a farmer's neighbor. So I think given the fact that we already know from the human studies, not the animal studies, the human studies, that people who live near these fields, not just people who work in these fields, but people who live near these fields, are twice as likely to develop Parkinson's disease.
We've heard contradicting as far as on that. We've heard both sides of that.
But,
So
well, let me talk about that because I also want to come back to California. So you're right that there are two papers to be looking at. One is the paper by Professor Paul and her co-authors that came out in 2024. The other is by Mr. Weed. So
Mr.
Douglas Weed, of Weed paper. And so let me I know exactly. His parents knew exactly what he was going to do the day he was born. So really important question. Thank you. So the paper that Professor Paul wrote was independently funded. It's by all university academics, peer reviewed, published in a peer reviewed journal, and based on data that was collected from individuals who live nearby. The important thing to know about the other paper is the author was funded by industry, has frequently appeared as a witness on behalf of industry. That paper was published in an industry-funded journal, and this particular author was sanctioned by a judge for providing false testimony. And I will happily send the order from that judge. So I think when you're weighing, I respect you for digging into the weeds of this. When you weigh the trustworthiness of these two papers, the Paul paper, independently funded, university academics, peer-reviewed publication, and the other paper, it's important to take a hard look at who the author is. Let me talk for a minute just about California, because this is because I know that's on your mind. Let me just say,
everywhere. I mean,
California, New York.
anywhere.
it doesn't
Yeah,
matter. I mean, everywhere.
Anywhere. So Vermont is not alone in wrestling with this question. So California is actively considering whether to ban paraquat. Many other states, I will miss some, but many other states with big apple production are also considering whether to ban paraquat, including Washington State, obviously New York, Pennsylvania. I'm going to miss a bunch of them. West Virginia, Ohio, Missouri, Iowa, Minnesota, is actually actively considering this week some similar legislation. So Vermont is not alone in trying to wrestle with these questions, and they're wrestling with these questions for two reasons. One is this bombshell paper telling us that paraquat's more likely to volatilize, to move into the air, to travel into our neighborhoods. And the fact that EPA, despite receiving this paper and doing this modeling, has decided to simply kick the can down the road for what at a minimum would be 4 to 5 years to continue to think about whether or not this chemical should continue to be used. I think one of the problems, and I'm a law professor who teaches pesticide law, maybe a little too enthusiastically. But one of the things that is important to keep in mind is that when EPA asks, should we phase out a pesticide, they're not necessarily taking into consideration the long list of alternative herbicides that farmers have at their disposal. And they're not asking whether or not they're not simply asking whether or not the risks are too great. They are balancing the need for the herbicide with the need of their neighbors and the environment. And they are doing that analysis on a pesticide by pesticide basis. When you step back and ask, should we continue to allow farmers to use this particular herbicide? It's not a question of whether or not farmers will have paraquat or have to resort to mechanical or cultural changes, right? There is a long list of herbicides that farmers have available to them to manage this. And we know that farmers can grow apples and strawberries in particular without paraquat because farmers in other countries have showed us they can. So you've heard probably more times than you want, more than 70 countries have banned paraquat.
Yeah.
What
But
you
we've also heard that the reason why it's not banned here is because we have the most stringent requirements as far as applications of chemicals. As you just heard, in the old state of Vermont, with a fellow here that's trying to get people licensed, 4 people failed the test. So I would say that, we are doing a pretty good job to make sure that, that the application process goes as designed, very stringent.
So I'm really glad you mentioned that because as you've seen, I think Steve showed you an image of what you wear when you're spraying a restricted use pesticide. You're wearing a Tyvek suit, you have a respirator, you have gloves, you have boots. So when I use my vac sprayer to handle my mugwort, hope you never have to deal with mugwort. I'm suited up. My neighbor is not wearing any protective gear. My neighbor's not wearing a Tyvek suit or a respirator or gloves or boots, or even has any notification that I'm spraying a herbicide that has been linked to Parkinson's disease. And until October of last year, that didn't matter, right? Until October of last year, if I was suited up and spraying paraquat with my wand, I assumed, as I'm sure Mr. Shore now assumes, that it just stays put. I don't see drift because of the way gramoxone is formulated. What no one can see is this question of vapor. And I know I'm going to keep coming back to this because to me, it's if you agree as I do, if you see that this pesticide can volatilize, move into the areas of vapor, and then move into our neighborhoods, and then you look at what animal studies tell us about what happens when this particular herbicide enters our brains, you will begin to think, okay, what are the other chemical herbicides that our apple growers have available to them? Canadian apple growers also cannot use paraquat. So they grow 400,000 metric tons of apples in Canada, mostly in Quebec and Ontario.
So what do they use the paraquat for? Because they do sell it up there and use it.
It is not registered for use in Canada. So Canadian apple growers are not using paraquat. So
What about fruit growers, like strawberries?
paraquat is not registered for any use in Canada. They are one of the they have not by statute banned its use, but there are no uses of paraquat that are registered in Canada, full stop. There are other countries that also have many apple growers. I think one of you asked about Poland
Mhm.
as also has banned use of paraquat. So again, I'll send the list. There's a
I'm
long
sorry,
list.
did you? I'm confused. You said they banned it, but it's not a statute?
So for a pesticide, we have a pesticide applicator here. You can probably former. Right. Well, one's an applicator. So in order to use a pesticide in most countries, including the US, Canada, European country, Brazil, China, you have to formally go through a registration process. You have to register the pesticide. That means you have to provide lots of data about the toxicity, about how you plan to use it. And then the US and Canada will produce a label with instructions that you have to follow or you're breaking the law. There are no uses of paraquat in Canada that are currently registered. That doesn't mean that Syngenta is going out of business. Willow Wood couldn't go to Canada and say, we want to register a paraquat-based pesticide. Sorry, I said,
No,
I went too far into the.
That's fine.
So I just wanted to hit on that last point one more time is that there are many other countries, Brazil, China, apple producing countries that do not use paraquat. 80% of the world's apples are made in countries, are grown in countries where paraquat cannot be used. 80%. Many of these countries, and Mr. Shore mentioned this, are their orchards are moving to high density farms as well.
Or they just go out of business, right? And we've heard Mr. Shore say, I'm gonna just downsize my ability to produce apples.
Well, I think I really hope Mr. Shore's not going out of
Well,
business. And we should, and as a
I
legislature,
thought he was a very credible witness.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think there are other apple growers in the state that I'm sure, and I'm happy to try to find. I don't live.
I
here.
wish you would.
I would love to live here.
I wish you would. There's
Yes.
very few. We've been beating the bushes here, no pun intended. We've
we're
been
happy
beating the
that- we're
orchards
happy
to find people who are really in favor of banning paraquat. We're not getting there. I think you're one of the first ones.
Okay. Well, I know Professor Mortensen, New Hampshire, not Vermont. My wife's family is from Mendon, so I know the difference. It would love to come back and supplement his testimony specifically around this question of alternatives. Because I'm a law professor. He's an expert weed scientist. He's the right person to come in and walk you through all the other chemical herbicides that are available for orchard farmers as an alternative to bromoxone or paraquat. And the other thing I just wanted to touch on, I know we've heard a lot about strawberries as well. So, and of course, as you probably know, most of your strawberries are grown in California. Of the 20,000 pounds of pesticides that were sprayed on strawberries in California in 2023, only 30 pounds were paraquat. So the vast majority of strawberry growers, these are all at scale commercial strawberry growers by and large, are growing strawberries, again, without paraquat. They're using other chemical herbicides. They're not using an herbicide that we now know can volatilize much more than we previously understood because of this new study on vapor pressure and can travel into our neighborhoods. The last thing I just wanted to say, and I want to make sure I got all your questions, Mr. Chairman, I'm taking notes, was this chemical isn't just banned in China. It isn't just made in China. It is made by the Chinese state government. So let me say that again. So most of the companies, including Syngenta, which of course is leading the market, that make paraquat are not just this chemical that's not just made in China. It is made by the state of China, the government of China, which has prohibited its own farmers from using it. And like Brazil and European countries, they haven't just banned it because it's an acute toxin. And I know you've heard a lot about that. they have also banned it because of these risks to bystanders
They get banned in a lot of these countries because they're using it to,
for suicide.
yes.
Yes.
And, it's just gonna keep on coming back to this, I think, for me and maybe a few of the committee members, which, you know, we are all wrestling with this and really trying to get to something here. The fact that we want to be the first in Vermont to ban this at 125 gallons and we have tons of it being used elsewhere just doesn't settle very well.
Yeah, I understand that. And
And what brings you to Vermont? You know, you're very esteemed. I'm very honored to have you in here. You know, on 125 gallons to come build to ban paraquat. What brings you here?
well, I'll just, first of all, I've been watching your hearing. I've been helping legislators in other states. I teach pesticide law and I work for the National Environmental Health Group, PWG. I felt that I had something to add to this conversation because I've followed this closely. And I've also listened, worked with many farmers and understand that no farmer wants to take a tool out of the toolbox. I'm sure you've heard that from other witnesses, how important it is to have tools in the toolbox. So one of the other things that I thought I could offer was that, which you would only know if you followed the EPA registration process as closely as someone like I would, is that in the last 15 years or so, I wrote it down because I wanted to share this with you. Since 2015, the last 11 years, 18 new herbicides have been added to the toolbox, and 9 new herbicides are currently awaiting registration. So I get it. When I take my students to visit farmers, when I work with farmers, I've worked on 6 farm bills and many other pieces of state bills. I talk to farmers almost every day. I get it. Nobody wants to take a tool out of the toolbox. The toolbox is full, and we're adding more tools to the toolbox all the time. And this isn't simply a question of whether we use paraquat or resort to manual or cultural things. And so the other thing I just also wanted to say is I know how hard it is to stay in agriculture. I live in a part of rural Maryland where my neighbors are all farmers. And there are certainly the costs that farmers facing are going up right now because of lots of things that are out of their control, like the cost of fertilizer and equipment and so on. But it's also the case that the cost of Parkinson's disease to a family can be really substantial. I think you heard from the Fox Foundation, 21,000 people currently in Vermont have Parkinson's disease. I asked them what the out-of-pocket costs for someone were, even if they had health insurance, to care for someone with Parkinson's disease. And the Fox Foundation shared back with me that it could be up to $60,000 a year.
Did they ask how many live by orchards? Do we have a count of that many? Because there's not a lot of orchards.
No, of course.
So it'd be,
In the age population
No,
in our state. And I think if you wanted to go down that route, which I really don't want to, but if you want to, that's fine. If we were to look at all the aged sicknesses that go on in Vermont because of our aging population, we are going to trend higher than most other states because of our demographic.
No, here's what we know. And the Fox Foundation is the right witness, so you might want to ask them these questions. We know that 22% of us have a genetic predisposition to develop Parkinson's disease. That aging and environmental exposures are increasing the risk of Parkinson's disease for the rest of us. So couldn't you say with certainty that my grandfather had Parkinson's disease, got Parkinson's disease because he worked in a factory where trichloroethylene was used, which is notorious for causing Parkinson's disease? Of course. But when it comes to these kinds of issues, we don't wait for certainty. We don't wait for proof of causation to protect public health. We didn't wait to ban DDT or to get lead out of gasoline or paint or to ban asbestos. We didn't have to understand the mechanism of action to understand how an asbestos fiber causes mesothelioma before we decided to end the use of asbestos.
I believe the difference here that it's just like we said, we're using a small amount on a very controlled circuit. And this is just one tool in the toolbox. And who's to say the next chemical they come up with that something isn't discovered with that, which they will, because everything they're meant to kill stuff, so they're gonna affect humans. Is our concern. I've looked up, there was 11 other states that are pursuing that. Only Vermont, Hawaii. Vermont's the only one that's passed a bill so far. H-160 that were, and in Hawaii, it hasn't, and then in 2024, it got shut down in California. And it's probably because of how big the industry is, and it's used.
It's used quite a bit in California.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we understand that. Understand where you come from. Did you come up here on your own accord, or did some outfit pay?
No,
pay
I work
to-
for the Environmental Working Group or National
Okay.
Environmental Health Group. I've been following this issue in many states and.
And our hardest spot is what we use it so little,
Right.
and so it's like.
But we take responsibly and controlled.
But let me say, can I just say one more thing? about
Absolutely,
that? So
yeah, absolutely. We
I-
appreciate
No,
you.
no, this is a great conversation.
Well,
That's
we-
why I've
we
only gotten a
appreciate
chance to testify here once before and,
I think also.
no, it went great. In fact, I've had the honor of testifying before Congress or probably 20 times. And it's, I wish that Congress took as much time to think about and turn over these questions as you all are. So I'm not honestly not saying that.
I've heard that from someone else too.
It's just so, but I think one of the things that when I listened to the earlier testimony, Mr. Chairman, that really struck me is farmers and applicators are incredibly well trained and they are following them because the consequences to their families, but also to their businesses can be really significant. So, so I have no doubt that farmers are following the label, that they are properly equipped, and that they are doing everything they possibly can to follow the rules and protect themselves and their families. I am until today, and maybe unless somebody caught this from Steve's testimony, I bet most farmers and applicators in the state of Vermont do not know about this new study showing the risk involved.
And I truly understand that part, but it's like,
So the people,
how distance break
well,
down.
sure.
You're an apple orchard, you go down to Storm, the closest house might be 2 miles away.
sure.
At that 2 mile mark, you got so much stuff that.
No,
it's just a straight
well,
shot.
it's a great question. This is not science, but I was looking at where some of these orchards are, and we have access at EWG to the cropland data layer, so I can see where the crops are growing. And I drew a circle of 2 miles, and I counted 5 schools, a bunch of other, places where people will tend to congregate outdoors, ballparks, etc., that are within 2 miles, not 2.7 miles, 2 miles of orchards where paraquat may have been sprayed. So, and we know it can, we know
How far in
now,
the atmosphere.
we know that that concentrations of concern can travel at least 2.7 miles. So, and look, it's trade-off. If I thought, and you asked this question, Mr. Chairman, during one of the hearings where I think you asked Steve of this question, is there a scenario where there could be an emergency where paraquat could be the only tool in the toolbox? And he was struggling to come up with an example. And if you told me that you couldn't grow apples in the state of Vermont without paraquat, I would say, well, look, this is a really important industry. We can use other tools to try to limit the amount this pesticide might travel. We could notify people. There are ways, but that's not the case. There are many other chemical alternatives that can help orchard farmers deal with this competition issue. And we know that because orchard farmers all over the world are growing the same crops without this one particular herbicide. So to me, if the risk is between, if the trade-off is I'm an orchard farmer who has to switch from chemical A to chemical B, and one less person gets Parkinson's disease, that seems like a pretty simple trade-off. But
So, one of the things we keep hearing about is that it's used, such a small amount is used in Vermont. I don't know that that's correct. I just know the number. And I'd asked this before and I'm asking you, I don't know if you'll have the answer. Do we know, how much per capita is used in Vermont compared to California? I had not heard the 500,000 gallons, so I'm not
I
going
think
to
of our testimony and I struggle
I
to
have,
use that, but yeah.
I have data as of 2019 from USGS of a state by state use, and I'll send that to you. I'll get that.
That would be helpful too.
By major crop like orchards, corn, silage. Yeah, I got it.
more detail.
Yeah, I got it. I can send that to you.
The other question I had was, so we heard from fairly large orchard in my district in my town the other day. And I may be within 2 miles of this. And it sounded like they might have started using paraquat in the past couple of years and been using it. So when should I check with my kids to see if they have Parkinson's?
Oh gosh, I'm not a doctor.
Okay.
I'm not getting
I'll
into
ask
that
that. I'll
question.
ask that.
Ask your doctor. Ask your doctor. Yeah.
But you did say that it stays there for a while and it's something that we would not necessarily see right away.
So what I'm sharing with you, what I'll just share
Yeah,
the
just what
data with you. Once it volatilizes and turns into a vapor or travels through the air, it can stay in that form for days.
Yeah.
How long? I can't tell for sure.
I guess the other question we had is, we've been talking about in Vermont, we have an aging population. I learned that the average age is 43, which seems too young to be an aging population. But regardless,
Not based on this group.
so I assume there are certain risks for Parkinson's. So age is one of them.
Age is absolutely
Genetic predisposition.
for about 22% of us.
So then you introduce paraquat into that equation, and that makes it more risky for our older population.
Yeah.
So in Vermont, we have an older population, the paraquat use
That's right.
is that much more risky.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And it goes back to your question, Senator.
Seems like we should have the data that we'd be able to prove.
And I'll do some homework for you. But I think to your point, that we know because there's been thanks to the Fox Foundation, a lot invested into understanding which of these chemicals get into the substantia nigra portion of the brain and cause the oxidative stress that results in cell death. And we know trichloroethylene is one of them, just banned a few years ago. We know, and I think Dr. Boyd mentioned this, rotenone is one of them, not used on food crops or farm crops. It's used for like managing weeds in ponds, things like that. So there are the limited number of chemicals that have this impact from animal studies, cellular studies, mechanistic studies, enter the brain, stay in the brain, start this chemical chain reaction that results in cell death, and that ultimately leads to Parkinson's disease. So again, about a quarter of us might have the gene. One of us might have the gene where we have a predisposition to developing Parkinson's disease. For the rest of us, it'll be the exposure that will likely contribute or aging or both. And again, I want to emphasize, I've worked with farmers for many, many years, more than 3 decades now. Farmers want alternatives to control weeds. Weeds, if any of you have ever had weeds, weeds are outsmarting us in lots of ways and affordable. But farmers, we've phased out pesticides before, DDT being the most famous, and farmers have found new tools. And I was thinking about our friend Walt at Sugar and Spice.
Yeah.
And so if you told Walt tomorrow that he could no longer use a particular additive to make waffles, he would have a big palette of other additives that he could use to make waffles. And farmers are no different, right? They know that there's a long list of other chemical herbicides that they have at their discretion. And they also know, as I do, they don't know how many because I looked it up, but they know that there are many other herbicides that have just recently been registered or are pending registration So again, the toolbox is full and it's getting fuller all the time. This one particular herbicide, if you weigh the cost, the potential cost with the benefits, it just simply no longer makes sense.
So one of the studies here that the House, and it might be exactly the one, it just worded different in here. In the House version of the bill, it says in October, and it might be exactly what you said, although the dates seem off. In October 2025, the EPA has issued a memorandum titled Paraquat, Review of the Volatilization Potential of Paraquat from Field Uses, and determined that there is a greater uncertainty regarding the potential for paraquat to volatilize than previously understood. The EPA concluded that more data is needed to understand the risk paraquat poses to bystanders.
That's correct.
So that's the study here that you're referencing.
That's right. And that was the study that Steve mentioned and yes, that's right. And I Professor, Senator, maybe Professor Heffernan. I will work with, and Professor Mortensen, if you'd be willing to take more testimony from him, might be able to answer this for you tomorrow. I know he's available tomorrow. Just to sort of do some of the calculations that I think you're trying to do in your mind right now, which is if, as Mr. Shore mentioned, you applied, he said 20 gallons of paraquat on his orchard farm, how much of that, based on what we now know about vapor pressure, how much of that volatilized, how much will go into the air, how far might that travel, how many people might be downwind because it will travel with the air, how many people who might be, it might be you, Senator Blanket.
I might not be within 2 miles.
But that's but I come back to the point. and look, I think if again to your question, Mr. Chairman, if this was the only way to grow apples in the state of Vermont, that would be a different story.
Well, I feel we're low hanging fruit not used on, but I think that's one of the reasons that they're here in Vermont. And if the rest of the nation is, and I'm looking, there is actually a lot more bills out there.
Yeah.
If you go to the GSA site, US, whatever, but there's a lot more bills out there. I just hate, I had a fellow senator say, just hate to be the first one to start a role that we use is so limited and so small. And
I'm not sure you'll be the first one, but
We are the first.
we would be the first one to pass.
We are the first
but I
one.
think
And so
other states are actively.
I'm
And here's the worry for a lot of our farmers, and this is what we're hearing over and over. I took so many calls this weekend. What's next? What's coming next? And we know, of course, and we know that there will be. And so, with something as small as this right here, I mean, we're hearing testimony about the last thing that was banned was neonicotinoids, and we're finding out the testimony that was taken. It should never happen. And so our farmers we're an ag state. We're an ag state predominantly, and so that they are feeling that we are the last stop to protect them from, you.
offense.
But that's what we're hearing.
For farmers watching it.
Right.
Doesn't right.
So that's where we're at. I absolutely positively appreciate you coming in. You were helpful. We don't use words in this committee that are meant to just make people feel good. You're very valuable. Your testimony was very valuable to us. I feel it was to myself, and I know what the questions that are being asked. So
You've waited it even.
Well, and if you would like to hear again from Professor Mortensen, he's just across the state line in Durham, I think, and he's available tomorrow to answer some of your questions. And I can send you a list of alternatives. I'm just sending you what's in the small fruit guide that you can all look at on the internet. I've also pulled, and I'll send this to Linda as well, because I was curious from the USGS data. I'll send the USGS data. How many pounds of these alternatives are used on orchard crops? Because I don't have apples per se, I have orchard crops. And so some of them, in some cases, more than 1,000 pounds of some of these chemical alternatives are being used on orchard crops. So again, as an evidence that farmers are using other tools, but I couldn't tell you from this data that they're using it for this particular use of dealing competition in their early years of establishment on this particular crop samples. So, anyhow, I'm not sure anyone could.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you very
thank
much. Many relatives in Texas?
I do have relatives in Texas. Yes, they're ranchers who are favors in Texas. Are you?
I have one, his name is Doug, and I've got a conversation going on with him on another matter, so I didn't know. So,
Yeah, I have an uncle who worked for NASA in the 50s and 60s and built simulators that trained astronauts. Oh, and yeah, he just passed. He was 94. It's good. Good point to make.
well, absolutely appreciate you coming in, and anything that you can share with us would be helpful, especially the amounts that other states use. I would love to see what other apple growers are using in place of paraquat.
Yeah.
And anything that you think that would be helpful to us as we move forward. I think by Friday of this week, maybe we might be, if not a little bit before that, we might be trying to wrap some of this up.
Okay.
We're getting close, but really do. Thank you for being a good
Yeah,
sport.
thank you, and hope to see you at Sugar and Spice.
There you go.
Okay.
Walt's a good man.
Walt's a great man. Stay away from the donuts.
He doesn't own that anymore.
Oh, he sold the donuts. Oh, I didn't. But he still has the Italian restaurant.
He still has Nona's and Sugar's.
In every-
Committee, you good?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just see what we have going on tomorrow. We're a little light on tomorrow's schedule up to 1 o'clock. We do have the Retail Grocers Association come in, and maybe we won't be late. Maybe we'll have a lot of questions on that. I wanna dig into as deep as that as we can. That is just a lot of unknowns as far as on that right there. So, let's see what else we have. Thursday we're kind of open. Friday we're kind of open. So it is now time as far as a lot of what we got going on to get some more testimony as far as any of the other miscellaneous bills that we have. We have until May to wrap a lot of this stuff up. So let's not let's use our time wisely. It will come fast. We'll feel the pressure of it. So we have some time this week. If you got anybody that has been asking to come before the committee, let's get them in on any topic that we have that's going right now. So it will come sooner than what we think.